E-commerce students, today we're going to be getting into some of the key concepts about marketing and advertising specific to e-commerce. A little bit of a preface to this discussion. Today's lesson will not make you an e-commerce marketing expert, but it will show you how traditional types of marketing have started porting online and how some of the same concepts work and how some of the same concepts don't work. So let's dive in. Some context for where we are at in 2024 and beyond. Never in the course of human history has there been an opportunity for companies and consumers to interact the way we do now. Through things like modern analytics, through things such as weblogs, through the transactions we make and the use of sign-ons, companies know a lot about consumers. And it's not all creepy bad. This is allowing companies to make products that consumers actually want. Instead of sitting around wondering what we should sell people, we can actually know what people want to buy. And that is what really is kind of the impetus of Web 2.0 or modern marketing. This is going to go to the next level once we get into more customer co-creations and AI. But we really are in a new and emerging era of marketing. So what are we going to be talking about? We're going to be talking about what's different about marketing on the internet, how we approach this, what our best strategies in tech to be able to do this are, and what some of the risks are, particularly when we get into things like social networks. So when we look at it, right now, the growth rate of broadband is slowing down. It's not that people don't want fast internet, it's that almost everybody has it. Unless, unfortunately, you're in a rural area and you're limited to things like dial-up and satellite, we've got, for example, almost everybody in the country has some ability, at least from a tech standpoint, to do e-commerce. If we go to younger demographics, people who are under the age of 30, they tend to be really comfortable buying online, particularly people who are college graduates and have good incomes. So we're seeing, for example, that there are a lot of times when different people have different levels of access. For example, if you live in a rural area, you're less likely to have broadband. And when we start talking about population, one of the reasons so much of the population in the United States has broadband is because it's all centered around cities. And so we've had all of these things happening at the same time. We have something going on called the community effect, and that means the people you're around tend to influence the way you behave. So if you live in an urban area where everybody is highly online and highly tech savvy, it's likely you're going to be as well. And that's going to affect your decisions in terms of what you see as trustworthy, the things you're willing to buy and not buy online, and again, what are the things you're going to look for online and purchase offline. We call that web grooming. So all of this stuff is really still a study in consumer behavior. And if you've never taken a consumer behavior class, it really is an exploration of why people make the decisions they make. Why do consumers choose McDonald's over Burger King? Why do consumers choose Toyota over Ford? We have reasons why we make decisions. There are some things that companies can control and some things that they can't. The great part about online commerce, however, is that these individuals are creating a trail. We can look at the decisions people make and keep track of them, and we can make better marketing decisions based on what people do online. This is a basic consumer behavior model. You would get this in any consumer behavior basic marketing class, but it still applies here. You've got the first set of things that you cannot, as a marketer, control. Culture, somebody's social aspects, and their psychological aspects. So do you come from a culture, for example, that distrusts banks? Socially, do you interact with others highly or not? Psychologically, are you a risk taker or not? Are you an introvert or an extrovert? All these affect what and how we buy. And so again, you can't really control those things. All you can do is play to them. Then we get into the second part of things. We get into brand, which is, the company. How does it appeal to people? How we market and what we can actually do as a firm. Those are all parts of the basic model of consumer behavior. However, what we can control, the intervening variables here, are what we do online, how we market over social networks, how we build communities. All of these intervening variables produce the dependent variables, which are ultimately between somebody's psychological background, cultural and social, and the way we interact with them, the intervening variables. What are they going to do? What are they going to do in a store or in an online store? And are they going to buy or not? So this is kind of the general model of consumer behavior. We'll get into the consumer decision-making process in this chapter as well. Speaking of that, there are 5 stages in the consumer decision process, and these are kind of universal. The first is the awareness of need, and this can come a couple different ways. For example, I could look down and say, my shoes look terrible. They're really worn out. I need a new pair. Or another way that the awareness of need could happen in the online world, I'm on Instagram and see that one of my buddies has a sweet new pair of custom Converse Chucks, and I need a pair of those too. The search for more information has been made much easier online because we have access to databases, social networks, and lots of ways to comparison shop. And that leads us to our evaluation of alternatives. Well, maybe I don't want Converse. Maybe I want Adidas. I can very easily compare those and look at lots of reviews. Then I've decided to make the decision. What did I buy? And what about my post-purchase contact with the firm? Am I tagging Converse in my social media posts, for example, and saying how much I like or don't like this pair of shoes? I'll give you a great example of how this has changed. I actually do own a lot of pairs of custom Converse Chucks. They're kind of my thing. Last year I purchased a pair and they started ripping. The fabric actually started tearing when I contacted Converse. They had it right in 2 days. They had a return and they had a new pair of custom Chucks being made for me because they know, what am I likely to do? I'm likely to take a picture of that and post it online. So if we look at how this decision-making process works with what we refer to as offline media, which is legacy media, and online media, this is how it works. When we know that we need something, again, it could come from the old days. I saw a television ad with a new pair of Nikes. In the new days now, I might see targeted advertising coming through my Facebook feed because they know through the use of cookies and advertising networks that I like Converse. Then I'm going to search for alternatives. In the old days, I might actually go to the store or look at a catalog. I could still do that today, but I'm more likely to probably start my information search for alternatives online. I'm going to evaluate those alternatives based on offline, talking to my friends, looking at Consumer Reports, that old magazine, or I could go online and look at reviews, even on the actual site. Good companies are posting the good and bad on there. Then I'm going to decide to make a decision. And what might make me make a decision if I'm in a store is getting a coupon. If I'm purchasing online, all of a sudden I received an email with 50% off. True story, by the way. That spurred me to buy shoes I didn't need several times. And what's going to be my post-purchase behavior? Well, offline, I might have to take my product back in for service or warranty work. Online, I might talk about my product. I'll give you a great example. I just recently bought a Toyota Tacoma. I love this pickup truck. The online communities for this truck, in terms of the way people talk about it, it's unbelievable. So I would be shocked if somebody from Toyota wasn't playing an active role in many of these online communities to see what people are saying about their product. So again, it's very similar to the offline purchasing process. Inherently, we have to know we need something and look for information. But the difference is that we have the ability to find this stuff online. Now, the extent to which you're going to rely on online information as opposed to going to a store is going to depend a lot on your culture. It's going to depend on you as a person. Ultimately, your background, your beliefs about e-commerce are going to determine what you do online, which is clickstream behavior. Clickstream behavior simply means what sites do you go to, how frequently, and why, and that's how we create that trail across the internet. So again, if we look at this online consumer behavior model, the same things apply, except when we get into the intervening variables, the idea that we are able to share all this information about our product, the idea that we are able to be on social networks, right in the middle in the dotted box there, all those things can be communicated online. And ultimately, although we can't change a person's personality, as I said before, we can play to their personality. And so, for example, if we look at the things we can intervene with, like purchasing attitudes and perceived behavioral control, good companies will learn what works and what doesn't work with someone. For example, if I hold out and I get a 40% coupon on my inbox to buy a new pair of shoes, that says to me I've got control over this purchasing decision as opposed to somebody who's an impulse buyer. So all of those things in the dotted circle, we have a little bit more online play than we do in the real world. Actually, a lot more online play than we do in the real world. And again, everything inside the dotted box are things we have some control over. So at this point in time, yeah, most people are shopping online. Even if we've only got 8 out of 10 or a little more out of 8 or 10 actually buying, it's a big deal. And we've got more people who are buying online, or they're researching online and buying in person. And again, we're listening to other people, and we're listening to influencers, and we're listening to our friends. The research we do on things like Facebook and also on product reviews on Amazon influences what we buy. So what we're also starting to find is that people generally, although we do a lot of browsing online, we're looking for really specific things. At this point in time, fewer people are using Google as their main source of products than they did a few years ago. Why? Because we're doing a lot of our shopping on our smartphones, and we've got apps for Amazon and eBay. And so we're no longer going through Google for everything. And believe me, Google is still making plenty of money on advertising, but we've got more people who are going directly to the companies they deal with the most. The pandemic has changed retail as well, because in 2019, fewer people were likely to order groceries online. So we're even talking about things that typically were not online or e-commerce industries that now are. The other day I got home and there was a large cardboard box sitting on my front porch. And it was because my wife ordered paper towels online. She wouldn't have done that prior to the pandemic. Well, in addition to saying, well, that's great, people like Walmart and Sam's Club and Target can now deliver staples to your house. That's good, right? Well, think about how that changes the consumer decision-making process and things like the awareness of need. When I'm in a grocery store, I frequently become aware that I need a candy bar right when I'm at the checkout counter. And so it is absolutely changing the way we look at retail, and even things like traditional grocery shopping are not what they used to be because people are more intentional. The idea of curbside pickup or delivery, we're now being more intentional with our purchases, and spontaneous buys are not as big of a thing. And you may say, well, how big of a deal is that? That's just a candy bar. If you look at the markups on things like 20-ounce sodas at the checkout counter, that's a $3.50 soda, as opposed to $2.25 for a 2-liter if you buy it in the aisle. So yeah, they are missing out on a lot of extra sales here. The biggest reasons why people choose to purchase online are what we refer to as trust and utility. I trust that my information is not going to be hacked. I trust that I'm going to get my purchase. I trust that the company is not going to overcharge me, and their system works. Amazon's really good at this. In my entire time buying on Amazon, and I've been buying since the 90s, I have had a total of 1 lost order. I'm not saying I'm happy about the lost order, and that was during the pandemic. But that's a pretty good track record. And again, sometimes the best functioning sites are not necessarily the best looking ones. So what's great about doing all this digital? Well, again, we have shopping systems now that are really catering to us. We have the ability to look at other people's opinions of products. I don't have to just trust the company's opinion of their own product. I get to hear from somebody else. And we also build communities around the products we love. As I mentioned, I'm a member of several Toyota Tacoma groups online because there's a lot of us middle-aged guys who are really obsessed with our pickup trucks. And an effective company these days is doing all of these things. They're making marketing and interactions with customers that are more personalized, more participatory, allowing individuals to talk to each other and build communities. So what's the role here? We no longer can say we're just going to have a website or we're just going to have an offline presence. Companies that are succeeding at this stuff really have a lot of different approaches to this. You got a website, which these days we're looking at kind of our landing zone, the place where you're going to go find basic information about a product. You're still going to do advertising, and we look at, for example, search engine advertising, which Google is still king. You might do display or email ads, etc. Social is where it's at, however, because this is the intersection between traditional marketing, i.e. showing people products you have for sale, and having a community around it, having a buzz around it. And if we look at this sort of thing these days, People love products. They're invested in brands. My example with Toyota is one small part of it. And then we add on to that now that mobile is a big part of this as well. I think one of the original ideas was that because of the ubiquitous nature of smartphones, people would be buying anywhere, when in reality, mobile marketing is really playing very much into local because we're using our phones to find things in our own communities now. And then again, we've got the legacy media that are still here. There's some cachet that comes whenever you see an ad on television for a company. It says they've made it. However, television advertising is going down. For the most recent data that I have, it's 2 consecutive quarters of decreases in spending. What's going on here? Well, what's going on here is more people are saying that I'm going to be intentional about my television viewing habits. And even if I'm still watching a major network like Peacock / NBC or Paramount CBS, I'm going to watch when I want to watch. I'm going to pay for not having to have ads. And here's the other thing too. Even companies, as of the time of this publication of this video, Amazon now is reintroducing advertising into all of their Prime Video. And so everything old is new again, but we're spending less on flat out television advertising. So the things we got to think about here is where do you spend money, how, why, and how do you track it? How do you make sure the money you're spending is actually producing some results? So again, the website is kind of the anchor. It's the place where you have key data about your product. Most companies, unless your website is direct sales, like something like Amazon, Toyota is not going to have a message board on their website. They're going to provide basic information about all their products and give you some idea about who they are as a brand. The colors, the imagery, the way products are presented. That is kind of our ideal identity. Then we get into, again, online advertising. And this is the best way to reach, heavy web users. And any of this stuff can be done, whether it's display ads, things that actually pop up on websites, sponsored ads in search, for example, mobile ads that come up. And again, it is a way to for us as companies to send very specific messages to very specific people. Search engine marketing is another big part of this too. The idea that we monitor what people search. For example, Google is king at this. We say about all the things we get from Google for free, when in reality, we are paying with our information. I have a Gmail account, and as a result, I'm more likely to use Google Chrome. Google Chrome is more likely to track where I go on the internet because Google maintains control over that stuff. They don't allow third-party cookies anymore. It's all their own stuff. And so essentially what they'll be able to do is create a profile of me, email me links or ads, or give my address to advertisers who could contact me. And so all of this goes into email and lead generation. And then we get into affiliate marketing. And that simply means that, for example, I might put a link on my site. Let's say, for example, I'm one of those Toyota communities and I'm selling Toyota t-shirts on my website. I have a link to another company that sells parts for Toyota pickups as an affiliate, and I get a little kickback from marketing their site as well. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. Search engines are still huge, and there are people who are paying big money to be able to get into your feed, into your Google search. Keyword advertising and Google Ads, what this means. Again, we'll do some discussion about advertising networks as we continue here. Essentially, advertisers who get involved with keyword advertising, meaning when people are searching, for example, for truck, Toyota ads might come up. And then we also get into Google AdSense. We get into deeper connections between content and potential interest. For example, I happen to, if you've ever seen my office in person, I happen to really love comic books and superheroes. So I go to a lot of Batman fan sites. And some of these fan sites that I go to are supported through advertising. And so Google might be placing ads on those sites. And when I visit them, they're going to come up as ads for Batman stuff. And again, we get into SEO. This is on the company side of things. How do we make sure that we create websites where our content is going to come up in Google's top 10? And that's not easy to do. We talked about that in the last chapter as well. Again, we're getting into visual search now, Google image search and the like. Google Lens has really been something that's been helpful for a lot of people. You see a shirt you like, somebody's wearing online, and you can do a visual search for it and find out where to get it. And again, we're getting into other things too, like voice search with things like Siri, for example, and Amazon Echo/Alexa. It's especially in this current time of AI revolution, we're going to see more conversational type searching instead of having to add search terms. And again, what are some of the issues with this? Nobody truly knows how Google specifically decides who's number one in a ranking if you're searching for a product or service. In the old days, the idea was if you clicked on a link enough times or posted it enough times, that it would come up higher in Google search rankings, so people would commit click fraud. People still do it now for things like Spotify. They want to get up in the rankings, for example, and that's what content farms and link farms were about. It was basically people would build entire pages of nothing but a link to a certain piece of content so that people could click on it or bots could click on it and increase their rankings. Display ads, we see these all the time. And we also have something now called interstitials. If you have been watching a YouTube video and there was an ad that you could not click through, that's called an interstitial. That's actually an old television term, and it meant they would come up between points in content. YouTube is really bad with that, in my opinion, and the fact that they're just randomly inserted in very jarring places. I don't know if that might even be intentional to get more people to be willing to pay for YouTube, but it is something that has really irritated a lot of users. What we're also seeing right now is that video is still king. If you have video as part of your advertising, more people will pay attention. And then again, we get into sponsorships, and that simply means, for example, we have sponsored content. For example, you can watch YouTube videos for longer periods of time because of a sponsorship. Native advertising simply means somebody's actually buying time during online content. And then content marketing, again, we've got a lot of content. I will use video as the example here. A lot of advertising masquerading as actual content. For example, a lot of the promos that come out for new blockbuster films are like 10 to 15 minute commercials at times, and that are promoting a particular product or service. When the last James Bond movies came out, for example, there are a few of those with Heineken beer that had a long action sequence that prominently featured the beer. So if you ever wondered what determined what ads you were getting, for example, whether you're watching a YouTube video, whether you're on a website that has sponsored content, etc., these are what we call advertising networks. As I've mentioned, we build a profile of ourselves online through the websites we go to, through the content we consume. We create clickstream behavior. It's amazing how accurate this stuff is. And advertising networks are companies essentially who will look at profiles and they'll buy advertising that will go to you. So an advertising network is intended to connect customers with companies with whom they might be interested. And an ad exchange takes that to the next level, where advertising networks essentially are creating or connecting content with consumers. Ad exchanges are doing this in real time, and they're doing it based on bidding. For example, in an advertising network, I may have a contract that says, okay, I want to make sure I'm hitting academic geeks between the ages of 45 and 65 who are really into pop culture, Toyota pickup trucks, and Batman, i.e. me. And they could make sure, for example, for a certain price that I'm seeing ads from specific companies. An ad exchange takes it to the next level in the fact that they're doing something very similar, but the bidding takes place in real time. So companies are actually bidding real money over milliseconds to be able to make sure their ad comes up. And it tends to be more micro-focused because we're talking about real-time bidding here. So here's an example of how an advertising network works. You've got somebody who is browsing the web, for example, and they are going to a particular website. Here they happen to be purchasing something. Well, as we're making that purchase, the cookies on our web browser that tell us, hey, this is where we've been, this is what you're into, this is what you like to do, that gets scanned and goes to an ad server, and an ad server at that point in time decides to populate your feed with advertising. And so it's based on who you are. And that's why, for example, if you and I both got onto Google Chrome, and went to the same websites that were part of Google, one of Google's AdSense networks, for example, we'd be seeing different advertisements. And again, networks versus exchanges, the big difference is exchanges are bidding in real time. Networks sometimes are based on long-term contracts. Exchanges are based on, well, this is advertising that we need to get out there, and companies are maybe even paying a little extra to make sure that the content they've created, the advertising they've created, goes somewhere. And so I thought this was a pretty good analogy from a group called Martech. And it said basically that networks basically are helping you buy specific stocks. Like if you're a stockbroker, and an ad exchange is helping companies that have ads that are not getting run to try to get some utility out of them. I thought that was a pretty good analogy. And again, we get into some of the concerns with any of this advertising. More people are using browsers like DuckDuckGo to try to filter out things like pop-ups and online advertising, for example. Some of the ads are glitchy or don't work well. And again, there's been a lot of fraud in terms of people trying to artificially increase the popularity of a given ad, for example. So email, we're going to go over email very quickly because it's one of those things you may be asking, well, why is it still sticking around? I want to address this topic directly in a way that doesn't insult anybody. People under the age of 30 are less likely to rely on email than people over the age of 30. It's part of my DNA as a Gen Xer. We just love it. We use email all the time. A lot of people are getting away from email and relying more on things like social networks or text messaging, for example. And the reason we still use it for everybody is because it basically doesn't cost anything. And even if you're getting small percentages of click-throughs, 3 to 4% people are actually opening their emails, yeah, it didn't cost you anything to send. The big challenges are, number one, a lot of people don't read it because they think it's all spam. And number two, they're filtering it out. Google Gmail does a fantastic job of getting rid of junk email, for example. And again, maybe the lists themselves originally just weren't that well targeted. And so again, email is still being used. Spam is, I think this percentage is probably higher, is over 40% of all email. And again, we've tried, companies have tried to get rid of it. It persists. And why? Because even if you get one person to click on that terrible fake ad, it was probably worth it. By the way, I have embedded in this PowerPoint presentation where the term spam came from. I highly encourage you to watch that video because it might show up as a bonus question on an exam. I would love to know what you think about the history of spam. So again, we get to affiliate marketing. It simply means that you are getting some kickback for relaying people or putting people onto another website. I'll use the example again. If I have Tonkin's Toyota, let's say I've got my own online forum and I'm doing ads for a Toyota shop that sells accessories, I might get a commission for any of the sales that go through that link. And lead generation is really kind of just an extension of traditional lead generation, meaning you're referring people to folks who might want to buy your product. You will see this, very heavily in business-to-business marketing. For example, in the business world, sometimes online referrals, click-throughs, can go as much as 50 cents per click, meaning if you refer somebody directly, a business-to-business client, to a business-to-business website, maybe somebody is looking for powdered metal or supplies, that lead generation where Google said back to a company that this person specifically might be interested in your product, if you pay us 50 cents a click, we can get them onto your website. That is an example of online lead generation. Again, this is where it gets hot. In terms of right now, social is the ideal place for online marketing. Why? Because much of what we're doing in modern social networks is visual in nature, as are a lot of products. And we've got the opportunity now in this Web 2.0, soon to be Web 3.0, for actual consumers to be giving honest reviews of products. And we tend to put more credibility when we see a quote-unquote average person talking about a product than getting a sales pitch from a salesperson, for example. And so social marketing is really a big deal, and it goes hand in hand with mobile. And mobile takes so many forms, between the videos we're watching on YouTube with interstitial ads, and the videos themselves may actually be thinly veiled ads. to the ideas now of getting more contact from companies and things such as text messaging if you sign up for a list, in-store messaging if you're using the Wi-Fi in the store, for example. And one of the things that few people saw coming is that mobile devices are really good for local marketing, for example. We tend to have our phones with us everywhere these days, and when we're looking for some place to go for dinner, it's usually our first stop. And we're going to be getting more into detail in the next chapter on this, but these are ideal platforms for local marketing. Again, if you are a larger company, you're going to be trying to do multiple things at once. Why? Because multi-level marketing is where it's at. Generally speaking, and I know this because I spent many evenings watching movies with my wife, and this, I'm not saying this is a good habit, but we both tend to be on our phones while we're watching movies these days, and I guess that makes us, pretty typical for the population of the States. And again, we've got the idea that you've got to have a consistent message across platforms because most people are interacting with a company in more than one way. Other things to think about. The more that we can make content geared towards somebody's interests or personality, the idea of customer retention is going to be more successful. I love this idea of customer co-creation. I'll use the example again. I'm thinking probably 6 or 7 pairs of custom Converse Chucks. I can create them online on my phone, on my desktop, save the designs, and in 2 weeks, they've arrived. They're Converse shoes that I helped create. I can even have my name stitched on them if I want it. And we're getting more into the idea we want constant feedback from companies. If we want service, we want it now, which is, by the way, where AI is going to really play a role here. In terms of traditional pricing, we've got a lot of changes because of the online world. Amazon is changing their prices several times a day, and there's some really great videos out there on dynamic pricing. But what it means is that we are looking now on online how we can price our content, price our services, price our products to meet the people who are looking at them. And so again, one of the things that we saw in one of the earlier chapters is the efficiencies of e-commerce theoretically can help us drive down prices so we can make our prices lower, and we have to decide how much we want to mark up. For example, are we going to go by volume? Are we going to go by individual sales? Piggyback strategy simply means once you lower your price, somebody else is going to do the same. During the holidays this year, I was thinking about getting a new Ring camera for my front door. I saw a special come up on Target for $54. It was a good price for a Ring HD. Lo and behold, Amazon's price dropped to the exact same amount for the exact same amount of time. So companies are piggybacking on each other, and price discrimination is still a thing. Sometimes it plays out in our favor, like the Amazon and Target example. Sometimes products cost more depending where you buy them because we get too overwhelmed to shop all the time. We are also in the freemium era. And for example, if we're using YouTube for free, if we're using Spotify for free, what do we have to put up with? We got to put up with ads. And so that leads to versioning. So you're going to have to get the premium version or you're going to get the freemium version. Bundling means I'm buying products or services together. For example, I get Hulu and Spotify together. Dynamic pricing. We can do an entire lecture just on how that's transforming the world. By the way, not limited to online purchasing anymore. Next time you're in a grocery store or in a Kohl's or in a physical store, look around and see how many of the pricing, the price sheets in front of products are no longer actually tagged to the product itself, but there's a little digital price display so we can change pricing as the product pricing itself changes. And again, we have dynamic pricing. Surge pricing is most common with things like Uber, that we get into the idea that if there's high demand for a product, we can raise the price. One of the things we talk about very much in e-commerce, and something I play a part in with my interest in things like pop culture, is called long tail marketing. Anybody who's ever taken a stats course knows that most things fall out within 1 to 2 standard deviations of the center of the curve. There are people who have very specialized interests, and they go to what we refer to the long tail, the people who are several deviations or a number of deviations away from the mainstream. With the internet giving us access to more consumers, we can sell to people who are not part of that central part of things. Let me give you an example. Although I hold nothing against anybody who likes mainstream music. People who are Taylor Swift fans would be right in the middle of that curve because there's a lot of them. She's very mainstream. People love her music generally. I listen to a lot of really weird heavy metal bands that would go out further on the tail because fewer people know about them. But there's still enough people who are into this kind of music that can make a profit for that band if they are selling products like band t-shirts or vinyl that we can cater to the long tail. And again, you can produce this stuff to meet the audience that you have. And that's what the long tail is all about. And so a lot of this stuff right now comes down to finding what you're looking for. This is where we have a debate about privacy to some extent versus convenience. The very fact that Google and Amazon know so much about me has helped me connect with content and products that I really like. I have bought toys, for example, action figures for comic book properties I'm interested in. I've bought music and band t-shirts that I would not have known about without a recommender system that got to know me, for example. We also get into the idea that at this point in time, even in places like China, for example, human recommender systems, people actually getting to know you and recommending products to you are coming back around as well. So in-person or personal selling, for example. And so we've got a lot of things happening at the same time. So in terms of the impacts that all of these things have had on marketing, generally speaking, people have access to more information, richer information, and we're always connected, and companies know us better than maybe they ever have. Why? Because of what we refer to as weblogs. When you visit a company's website, from the moment you enter it, if they've got a cookie on your browser, we're going to be able to answer, where did you go? And from those patterns of behavior, we can discern how to better interact with you. How long do you typically spend? Where do you go? What kinds of products do you look for? Where do you go on the website? And it also gives us an idea of how to better manage our websites. For example, we see that a lot of people are watching video. We better make sure our video servers are up and ready to roll if they're watching product reviews, for example. All of this is possible because of cookies. And now Google has made the commitment to ban third-party cookies. And don't let that lead you into believing that Google isn't tracking where you go. Google is absolutely tracking where you go. The difference is now, instead of allowing third parties onto their browser, they are selling the information to advertisers as well. So the bottom line is that the technology that monitors where we go online is determining how companies interact with us. If you are a company that keeps track of your users, you're also going to do this through a database. And when we're talking about relational databases, essentially what we're looking at is multiple variables. For example, if I wanted to reach out and find out who are my richest consumers, maybe I was looking for females over the age of 55 with net incomes of over $250,000 who buy diamond jewelry. If I were maintaining a good database, I'd be able to find and target to those consumers. And so that is the advantage of databases, that we can correlate data and better use our systems to communicate with people who might be interested in our product. Ultimately, we start talking about big data. Data warehouses essentially create trends, or analyze trends, I should say. If we've got enough years of purchasing history, we can see what worked, what didn't, what were our peak times of sale, what were the times when people made better purchasing decisions or more frequent purchasing decisions, and we can target our marketing and the way that we interact with our customers based on the trends that we have seen. What are the challenges of this stuff? It's a lot of information to make sense out of, and you need people skilled in the art to be able to make this data into something usable, and there's just gigabytes of it, for example, or petabyte and exabyte, I should say. The words I've got to start using more of the time. And if you're a large e-commerce company like Amazon or Apple, the old ways of doing things are giving way to new, more powerful databases. And again, companies like Hadoop are taking advantage of that. This also leads us into how we interact with our consumers in the first place. And we say customer relationship management systems. In the old days, we'd be talking about making a phone call and somebody being able to pull up your account. These days, we're talking about automated CRM systems. For example, if you got a problem with your order on Amazon and to use one of their AI chatbots, it's amazing how quickly they can resolve most problems. And if they do connect you to a human being over chat, they're probably working on multiple cases at the same time. And these, again, help us save our relationships with customers. It takes about 5 times the resources to create a new customer versus keeping an existing customer happy if something goes wrong. And that's why these are so important now as well. So if we look at how customer relationship management systems, they integrate all of these things together between the online and offline forms of interaction and communicating all of this information, whether you are making a phone call, interacting in store, interacting over a social network. If you've got an account with this company, it's going to build a more detailed profile and help that company better communicate with you. Some of the other things that we need to know about, these are just terms you need to be conversant with. Things like click-through rate, for example. How many people are actually going through your site? How long are people staying on your site? Conversion rate simply means a conversion rate can actually mean whatever you want it to mean, but a conversion rate generally means, did you convert somebody from a browser to a customer, for example? Are people actually watching the video ads that you're putting out there? Are you getting people to look at the emails you're sending them? And again, if we go back to this, it's a typical marketing funnel. Look at that right in the middle. We've got our consumer decision-making process right up top. We've got the communications that go alongside with it, correlated with it. And again, from awareness to post-purchase behavior, it's a typical marketing funnel. We can, however, control how we interact with the customers along the way. So how well does online advertising work? That's something you should be paying attention to in terms of monitoring your analytics. And hopefully you've had a chance to at least take a look at Google Analytics and see what we can know about our customers. And again, the difference between the old days and the new days. I'll give you a great example and an analogy to go along with our text. In the old days of kind of one-sided advertising, when companies would advertise on television, they would rely on people at home called Nielsen families to report on what they were watching, what ads they were seeing. It was really not a very efficient way of knowing what worked and what didn't. Simply tracking when people are clicking on ads, what emails and what discount rates are getting people to make purchases, we can, as companies, make better informed decisions about these kinds of ads at this point in time. So again, how do we buy this stuff? Companies barter with each other, for example. If you put some affiliate links on my website, I'll do the same for you. We can charge per clicks, for example. Google will do sponsored ads and charge a company per click, and you can set a budget for that, for example. It can still be challenging. I mean, if people are coming to your website and they're not buying anything, or that one person out of 100 is buying something, was that a successful advertising campaign or not? It's not easy to always quantify. All of these are things we should be looking at, though, in terms of knowing if our campaign was successful. Essentially, did people know about our company? Ultimately, are they making the purchase or not? What is our return on investment when we're putting all this money into online advertising? So if we look, for example, of the online advertising process, again, this sort of correlates with the consumer decision-making process. All of these are ways we can kind of evaluate whether or not people have been seeing our ads, whether it's been successful or not. So for example, engagement simply means people are clicking on your web page, they're going through the content. Interaction means they're actually getting in and posting and tweeting or interacting on social media. And finally, are they buying something and talking about it after they purchase it? A lot of content and very little time. This is a very beefy chapter. I appreciate your time and attention today. Look forward to interacting with you soon.